Okay. All right. So basically what you were saying was it's one step at a time and you had some support and then you were going to say
Yes.
something about Lisa's part in it, or you were going to say something there.
Well, he had just said that, at this point I was already
Oh
working
yeah.
with women, and
Hmm.
Oh
then
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
she had been so when this whole started, when this whole thing started, we found a church. When we moved, we found a church, and we talked to the pastor. I think it was after the first Sunday we went to. We were
yeah.
like, we need a meeting, and we sat down, and I told him everything, and he just spoke life into me. There was no shock on his face. There was nothing. It was like nothing unusual. Right? It was just like, okay, so it happened, but I see where God wants to take you. Like I can see what God can do in your life. So it was a huge. Our support system became this network of people at the church that we were involved in and friends of ours, and everyone's just helping us and pushing us along in their own way. And so during that time, Lisa started helping wives. um, I think they were all wives, right? There's some ladies that come to you. I don't know if they were single, but she was always helping wives. And I was just like, nope, I'm good. Like I'm fine. Maybe every now and then like talk to a guy, but I'm not really gonna do that. And our pastor at the time would always try to kind of get me to get up on stage and do something. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I would just flat out like, no, I'm fine. I'm not doing that. And it took a while, and finally God was like, no, you're going to do this. And he asked us to run or host or I would lead a marriage group at church. And we did. And that was the first time we'd ever told our story in the same room. Mm-hmm. We had never even told our story to each other.
We were hot wrecks.
We were hot wrecks. And that first night we told our story together in that room. And we were going through a devotion with everyone. And God just put on my heart. He's like, this is what you're doing. Everyone has a purpose, but this is what I'm calling you to do. The miracles that I performed, all the things that I had done in your life when you were on the side of that road and you did all those things and you came back, now you're going to show everyone the glory that I performed in your marriage. You're going to give hope to everyone. You're going to do this. And I'm like, oh, cool, but I don't know anything. That's cool. That's great, but I don't know what to do. And so, yeah, that was the end of 2019. We weren't sure exactly how this was going to go. 2020 is kicking off and we're going through 2020. And it was like, okay, we're going to start a podcast. Probably the worst time to start a podcast.
Or the best.
Or the best. Who knows? We don't know. But we started, social media, started all these things and just stepped into what God was calling us to do.
Ill-equipped, ill-prepared.
I mean, totally just having to point back to God, right?
Yeah.
Over and over again. And so that's how it progressed. And then it progressed to, okay, we were getting so many DMs, so many people messaging us and saying like, I've heard your story, or I've seen your page. I want help. And then the coaching started. And that was that was another huge step into faith and into what God was calling us, and getting certified as coaches and just going through that process. And even now, like whatever next steps there are, we're in prayer about it, but we totally, I would say, do not feel equipped for what the next steps are. And we're just,
which is just how God works.
Exactly. Yes.
It's definitely not a complaint. I feel more of, it's a beautiful place to be in, because I know that whatever we do, it's like, all right, God, you've told us to do it. So it's yours.
Yeah.
It's not ours. It's not me on stage. It's not me speaking at a weekend retreat. It's not me doing these things. It's because of you that I'm standing here. And so,
Yeah, I love that. It's all about trust and one step at a time, and none of it happens overnight, the healing or the purpose or anything. It's such a beautiful testimony of that. Yeah. And the other thing that really stood out to me was that I can only imagine what Lisa wanted you to know or feel or learn or all those things, but God gives us the message that we need to hear most of the times from other people or from, you found it on YouTube. And that was what shifted something in you. And yeah, the support is so huge, and just the daily discipline and small changes. It's really beautiful.
Definitely, for sure. I would say the other thing is we've run into this a few times, and I don't know if I ever did this, but not over analyzing yourself. I mean, I don't know how else to explain that. I think you could help me, maybe jump in, but it's, I didn't sit there and dwell on, like, why did I make these choices? Why did I do this? It's like that choice was made. For
Yeah.
whatever reason I did it, the choice was made. I can't undo it. So why sit on that?
Yeah, we always tell people it's important to discover the why, but you never find a why that justifies it.
No.
Does that make sense? So we always caution people, and I think this can go in any scenario. Everything you know, you have to heal from, right? So there is this certain aspect of, I think when you walked through any kind of betrayal of trust in any capacity, we go into PI mode and we want to know everything about everyone, and it's just unbelievable. But in some aspects, we dive into things that we don't need to, the details that don't, they actually hinder us, right? Because it's difficult to navigate through the images in your head. It's difficult to undo the messages that you've seen. And so it's important to get to the root.
Yeah.
And to go after that, but not to sit in it. So there's just a distinction there. And a lot of times people can't get past the why because it never justifies the action. And so that is, there's this understanding of, like, especially particularly in infidelity, the why never justifies the action. And so oftentimes it's a matter of recognizing that you do have to get through something, and you have to take every step in the right direction, just like every small step in the wrong direction can lead any one of us to places that we never meant to go. And that's just the reality.
Yeah. And honestly, I feel like that is the gap. If you don't have God, but you're just going to therapy continuously, just trying to figure it all out, there's a big missing piece there, right? Because I feel like, yeah, God is the ultimate healer.
Yeah.
All that surrender of needing to know the why.
Yeah.
Because in your situation, it was part of your journey, and now you're helping so many people. So who cares what the
Yeah, I mean,
it
it is like, I mean, Brad had to walk out some major things to recognize some root causes in his life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had to do the same,
Mhm.
but your goal is to not stay in those places, right? They're pretty miserable places to stay in. So,
and also I think that, like, a lot of, like, people are probably listening to this, they're like, well, what was the why? We had an average marriage before this happened. And I say average on purpose, but it was just your normal run of the mill marriage, kids, career,
we would have even said good marriage.
dog, yeah, house, all those things. So the why that we had, like, there was nothing. First of all, there is absolutely no why that should point back to your spouse. None of it. It doesn't matter. Lisa could have been, yelling at me all the time, degrading me all the time, all those things. It doesn't excuse me stepping out on our marriage. That's not healthy, but it doesn't excuse me from like, oh, I understand now. That's why you did it. No, that is
You
not.
have to own yourself.
Yeah, there's no reason in your marriage that should point back to your spouse at all. It doesn't matter if your sex life isn't good. None of that. There's no reason that I should say, oh, well, it was because she did this. This is why I stepped on it. There's absolutely nothing. It was all me. And there was a lot of insecurities I'd never dealt with. There's a lot of insecurities I have to this day. Like, there's all those things became a perfect storm without a rooted and grounded relationship with Christ. Became my why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There wasn't one singular thing. It was a mix of a ton of stuff. And it just spit me out on the other end, because I didn't have that strong relationship with Christ that I long to have, want to have. Like, I need to continue to grow it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't have that, all these things became a perfect storm and spit me on the other end of almost losing my marriage, losing myself, losing everything and not knowing what next. So there is a why that you can find, but we do tell people, like, you don't need to dwell on that why. Move past that why. Do you want your marriage to work? You're here in front of us, or you're here with your wife, you're here with your husband, you've moved back in, whatever it is. Clearly you want it to work. So to make it work, we understand something happened, but you have to move on from that. You have, and that's not easy. I'm not saying any of that's easy.
And you have to.
And you have to heal, and there's layers of healing and all that stuff. So none of it's easy, but
Worth it.
Worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the other thing is too, is that you were talking about spiritual warfare, right? And if you go down it was because of them, that's going to lead you down one path, and that's dividing you two. Whereas if you have a foundation and you're going to God and you are disciplined, that's going to lead you down a road where you can actually, there is resolution and you come closer together. So it is so impactful. So I have a couple more questions. So I just want to shift directions a little bit here. So now you're on the other side of it. So, to talk about dealing with healing, I watched one of your posts recently, and so healing is not easy, right? But especially as parents and talking about generational trauma, if we don't deal with those deeper things from our childhood, then our kids are going to have to, right? So what would be your encouragement for people who are afraid of, or maybe not recognizing what is dividing their marriage, or any tips on that?
Well, I think I know which one you're referencing, but I think so. This is the thing. I think people get caught up in, like, a generational curses, which we've actually had this whole conversation about how that's really not how God operates. But I think that we can look into the fact that just logic, we model what we see.
Yes.
Right. We model the behavior of our parents.
Mm-hmm.
We model the behavior of our mom or our dad, and both the good and the bad and the ugly.
Mm-hmm.
We consider that to be normal, right? Like that's our normal. And we often don't realize that that's not normal, quote unquote, until we're in a relationship with someone else who has their own version of normal. And then we're going to try to merge that together and make our own normal and model that for our children. Right. So then it's like, whatever you don't deal with, whatever you don't recognize as not a healthy behavior, whatever you don't recognize as something that you need to allow God to change in your life, right? To come in and wreck you a little bit, to come in and shift your thoughts into his thoughts, right? Your ways into his ways. Any of those things that you hold on to for yourself, yes, your kids have to deal with that later, because they're taking that normal, quote unquote, into their future relationships. So you better deal with it, because you don't want your kids to take what you have modeled for them and make it a problem that they themselves have to recognize later on. Like, wow, this was really unhealthy. Wow, my parents really did not handle conflict well at all. Wow, my parents really did not love each other well. I mean, like, wow, my parents did not deal with that addiction. And like all of those kind of things, that it's like, if anything, it's a call out to a war cry for you as parents to say, like, you want to live out faith in such a real way in front of your kids that they recognize the authority that God has over their life to transform them, to change things, to literally take what once was and make something new. And you want to live that out in such a real way that they want faith, that they want to live that out for themselves. And same for your marriage.
No, that's perfect way she put it. People, we know exactly which post you're talking about, because we've gotten a lot of, like, both sides of this. But I think the people that have had the negative, view on that post is they are like, well, but I'm not going to pay for the sins of my father. True, in a sense, right? So if you look at statistics, let's just, like, go statistically speaking, you have a divorced marriage, or you have a marriage where the husband or whatever, the spouse is stepping out, and there's constant infidelity and there's constant things like that. That's that person's normal. Like, that kid grew up, like Lisa's saying, that's normal. So
Yeah.
then he starts relationship and does the same thing. And it's like, this is normal. This is what guys do. And it's like, no, that's not what guys do. That's what your dad did. But that's not what men do. No, that's not what you're supposed to do. And that, I know that you were modeled that, but that's not what you're supposed to do. Now, in the low percentage, you'll have that boy get into a relationship and go, I don't want what my parents had. So I need to figure out and fight and understand how to have a healthy relationship and how not to do that, what he did to my mom, because I don't want that. And so you have these two sides, but either side is fighting either for what's their normal, quote unquote, or fighting against what they've seen. So the way I've been looking at it is like, I want, first of all, who we are on stage, on camera, on the podcast is the same people we are with our kids, same people we are with our friends, with our families, all that. We don't change. And I want my kids to see the model that we have. Then they have a better choice. Like, my normal is this.
Yeah.
And I'm probably have a greater chance to make the right choice versus if we ended up divorced and they were seeing me, every other weekend and whatever holidays we had, whatever it was, that would be their normal. Now they could choose to not have that, but they're going to have to fight to make that choice. It's going to be a harder choice not to have that because this is what they're used to versus having that healthy modeled in their life, the healthy parenting, the healthy family, the healthy husband, wife that's chasing after God. Seeing that, I think that gives them more of that. No, this is the decision I want.
And just to preface really quickly, like those that are feel like divorced and now feeling like an overwhelming flood of shame, like that is not the intention in this conversation, because that's the reality is that we know that no matter what broken circumstances we may come from, that our God is a redeemer of those places. And so you need to just stand firm in that. I love, there's a verse in Isaiah 54 that says that my children will be taught by the Lord and great will be their peace. I think it's like recognizing that you have decisions to make to still model out real, genuine faith in the most broken circumstances, in the not ideal, because the reality is that we all do not live out the ideal of what Jesus has for us here on this side of earth. And so knowing that there is redemption in your story, no matter the brokenness, but you do have an opportunity to carry on brokenness or to heal. You have an opportunity to model genuine faith or to model continued brokenness, so there's a choice that anyone has to make.
Yeah. So beautifully said, Lisa. I love all of that. Thank you for both of you for sharing. So important. And that really is such an eye opener. So, okay. And then, so kind of on that path, what does it look like now? So, the Bible talks about women submit to your husband, but obviously that doesn't mean that has a certain, I think people take that out of context, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then that carries a lot of, I'm sure, like, I don't want to say stress, but pressure for the husband too.
Yeah.
So what does that look like for your marriage now? And what tips do you have for people? What tips do you have? Like, what does a healthy marriage entail and play out?
So,
submit, woman.
Yeah, submit. No, no. Friends of ours say that. It's hilarious every time we hear it. No, men, I'm speaking to men specifically right now. Hopefully there's some men listening to this. I don't know. But men, husbands, you're called, if you're a follower of Christ, if you follow Christ, you are called to lead your home spiritually and physically, both. You're called to do that. That is what you should be doing. I get asked all that question all the time. Well, how do I lead my home? How do I lead? Because people think of it as like a manager, right? Like, oh, okay, let me keep a schedule, all these. It's nothing like that. I tell them, you have the perfect example. So Jesus, right, on this earth as a man, walking around, he gets 12 rough men to follow him. That's not because he was a dictator. That's not because of anything that he did in the sense of like this worldly leadership. It was because he was a servant leader He was a man among men. Like he was the ultimate, right? All 100% God, 100% man. But he led that group by being a servant leader. That's how he led that group. So ultimately, to lay his life down for us, right? Ultimately. So whatever it is, you have to step into that role as a servant leader. So that doesn't mean that Lisa does everything and I just lead the household, like quote unquote, right? No, that means that there are sacrifices. There's sacrifices on both our ends, of course, but there's sacrifices that I believe as a servant leader of your household that you should be making. You know, I can't think of one right now. I'm trying to think of example. I can't think of example right now, but just laying your life down for your family daily, you know, picking up the extra slack, all those things, praying with your family. Lisa and I pray for each other together daily. And then I pray with the kids every night. Like it's those things. And then also how you live your life. Like that, some of the best in my career, some of the best leadership that I've ever been under has been that model. And they weren't Christian, but it's been the model of, yes, I know you're under me, but we're in this together and we're making these decisions. And we're, you know, those were the best leaders I ever had. The worst leaders I had were the ones that always dictated everything. And no one wanted to follow them. I want my family to follow what Christ wants me to do, right? They're not following me. They're just following. I have a relationship with Christ. So do they. But also I'm just trying to like stand in that gap and protect them spiritually, protect them physically, be a servant to them. They need help. They need prayer, whatever it is. Like that's what I'm here for. And to guide them. But that's godly. I believe that that is how a husband, Christ follower, let me, you know, make sure that I say that, because if you're not, you know, essentially you're not bound by this if you're not a Christ follower, right? Because this is what it says in the Bible, but you should be leading your family, right? And that's how I feel that Jesus led. So I want to lead like that.
Yeah. And when you see someone following after Jesus and modeling Jesus, then you want to come alongside that. You want to, you know, we have this idea that, oh, you submit, you're not allowed to have an opinion. You're not allowed, like, no, that's ridiculous. Like, you know, what a husband is called to do is to love his wife as Jesus loved the church, which what did he do? He laid down his life. And I think that's the reality of knowing there's this beautiful picture of how Jesus loves us in marriage. It's meant to be that way. We clearly don't do that perfectly, any one of us, but it really is meant to be a really beautiful picture of how Jesus loves his bride, which is the church. And so there is this sacrificial love that is happening there. And when you have someone who's sacrificially loving you, you want to be with them. You want to be around them. You want to listen to their advice. You want to be following their leadership because they're following the ultimate leader, right? It's never done perfectly in a human relationship, but I think the striving after what Jesus has for each and every one of us individually, right? We're all called to our individual relationship with Jesus, allows us to then model the relationship that Jesus has meant for marriage, which is to be a picture of how he loves his bride, the church, better, you know? And so that's the ultimate goal, is not, you know, where you're walking around going, submit, woman, and, you know, and like that is not what it's meant to be. No. You know, we try to outserve one another. We try to outlove one another. Marriage is not fair. It is not meant to be fair. If you try to make your marriage fair, you will be miserable. There's going to be times when Brad is picking up the slack, and there's going to be times where I'm picking up the slack, and there are going to be times where he needs me to hold his arms up in the battle, and there's going to be times that he's going to hold my arms up in the battle, and there's times where we're going to hold each other's arms up in the battle. That's a beautiful depiction of what marriage is meant to be, is that we can love each other in our weaknesses, right? It's a daily choice. Marriage and love is a choice, a daily choice. It's not about emotions and feelings all the time. You're not always going to feel in love with your spouse. it is a matter of saying like, I choose to love you despite my feelings over and over and over and over, right? Because we all have bad days. We all have moments where, we have the opportunity to not choose the Christ example for us. And so it is daily choice. That's what it's all about.
So beautiful. And what I'm hearing is just a lot of humbleness too, and openness and vulnerability, and God first, and continuously choosing each other. So powerful.
We love being married, just so you know. Like
Well,
F1, when we said it's worth it, we have a marriage now that we never imagined that.
Our marriage is 100% better than it ever was.
Yeah.
And we didn't know there was anything wrong with the past marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. We at one point we're just aiming to have the marriage that we had, and then recognizing that actually that was dead.
Yeah.
And God was actually making something brand new, something much better. And because he had done so much work in us individually, that when he did bring us back together, there was this complete, like, I love that God is in the business of reconciliation. It's who he is, right? No matter whether it's your marriage or you as an individual, or the circumstance that you're in, like, this is God's business. He's in the business of reconciliation. You can trust him with that. He can take the most shattered, broken places of your life and he can make something brand new. Yeah. So we have gotten to see that both individually, and because we walked that out individually, we've been able to see that happen in our marriage. So I think just knowing that, God is such a redeemer. It is worth the work.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you for being such a beautiful testimony of that. And I guess to wrap it up, I would just love to hear any last tips for couples out there, like communication. How do you continuously choose to love each other even when it is frustrating? Or how do you support each other and hold each other up? Any last tips for people? And then where can anyone listening find you more and connect with you further?
You answering that question first or what? He never likes
how
to
to
answer.
Support.
Yeah.
Oh man. We'll be intentional with each other. Always. You should still be dating your wife. You should absolutely still be dating your wife. You should be buying flowers when it's not a special day. You should be going out with your wife. If you don't have much money, it doesn't matter. You can still do something.
Write a handwritten note.
You can still do something. So being intentional with your wife, doing those special things without any strings attached, right? It's just because. Yeah. Because I love her. Like, that's why I do the things. It's not because it's like, oh, well, maybe something's going to happen tonight. No, it's nothing like that. Also that, like, you should be doing that. Like, if you're too busy to do it, schedule it. Yeah. Like, figure it out. But those things do support us.
Yeah.
They show each other that we love each other, physically and spiritually, emotionally, all those things. Like, that is intimacy. It's the whole package wrapped up, right? So treating your spouse like they are, right? They are the special gift that God's giving you. Like, you need to treat it as such. It's the most valuable gift you'll ever get. Yeah. And you get to grow old together.
Your kids won't always be in the house, guys.
Yeah. The kids will be out, like, but those are the things. And we've told people that your kids should come after your spouse in this hierarchy, you have in your head. And we get a lot of pushback on that. But if you don't have a healthy marriage, your kids aren't going to be healthy.
Nor will they think the normal is a healthy marriage, and they will take that into another one.
And we're not ignoring our kids.
No,
so don't like everyone out there like, oh my gosh, they're horrible. No.
Don't DM us about
not ignore our kids at all. But they do know we are very intentional with each other and our relationship. And you have to be. You cannot just coast through a marriage. That marriage doesn't thrive.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that we really try to be really careful about, you mentioned communication, is we do try
Yes.
to always look through the lens that we are for each other.
Absolutely.
So, and we also try to deal with communication towards a resolution, right? Not just to be right. A lot of times we have this intention of like, I need you to get
Mhm.
my point.
Yeah.
I need you to understand me. And we don't go with a goal of a resolution. And we often don't recognize that often what our spouse is trying to say is because they are for us.
Yeah.
They're for our marriage. They're for better, right? So it begins to transform the way you communicate if you can come from that center, right?
Mhm.
Like this is being said because you are ultimately for me, right? We're on the same team. We are not on opposing teams. And if you are winning, you are losing, right? So recognizing that, there is no winner, there's not meant to be a winner and loser in a marriage relationship. And if one person is winning, everybody's losing, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the reality. So keeping a scoreboard is not going to actually help you gain any ground in your marriage. So just making sure you recognize
No,
those
in a
things.
marriage that's intentional with each other and pushing forward and trying to be stronger together, having a stronger marriage, making it more healthy, you should constantly remind yourself that your spouse is for you, just like Lisa's saying. So if she says something and I'm kind of like, whoa, I know where she's coming from. She has the best interest of me and the family and our marriage when she says whatever she says, or vice versa, whatever it is. But if you go through that lens, then you stop feeling like you're attacked on whatever subject it could be on.
Yeah.
And you start realizing, no, this is
I don't have to be
for the good.
defensive. I
Yeah.
don't have to always do, and then where to find us. Brad always hands this one over to me whenever it comes to where to find us. We're most active on Instagram, which is Unrelenting Pursuit _. Our podcast, you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. Just search Unrelenting Pursuit. You can find almost all of our information about coaching, reboot weekends, all of that good stuff on our website, which is unrelentingpursuit.org.
Amazing. All right. And which I'll link all of it with this video too. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. I really, really, really appreciate this conversation and being so open and honest. I have no doubt that people are going to get a lot of value from this. So very, very much thankful.
Yeah, no, we're thankful.
Awesome. All right.